Good morning, everyone. I think we'll bring the meeting to order here this morning. I think it's appropriate and necessary that we say the Pledge of Allegiance this morning. So if you'll rise with me, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Appreciate everyone being here this morning and being back to finish our process to fill the vacancy on the Board of Supervisors. We have our agenda set for this morning that's up on the screen. The agenda would be as follows: to approve the agenda, approve the minutes from yesterday's meeting, election appointment to fill the vacant Woodbury County District 3 County Supervisor seat, approval of that appointment, and to adjourn. That's our agenda this morning. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this morning?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a second, all in favor of approving this morning's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Vote passes 3-0. Second thing on the agenda this morning is to approve the minutes from the January 23rd, 2023 meeting. The meeting yesterday where we did the applications and did the interview process. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from yesterday's meeting?
Yes.
Mr. Gill, Ms. Bertrand?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as set forth from yesterday's meeting?
I would motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a second motion to approve the minutes, take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Vote carries 3-0. Third item on the agenda this morning is the election appointment to fill the vacant Woodbury County District 3 County Supervisor seat. Yesterday, towards the end of our meeting, we had a discussion about kind of what that process would entail. And I think that it would be good this morning, and my plan is to kind of take everyone in the same order in terms of Ms. Bertrand first, Mr. Gill second, myself third. I think it's appropriate to kind of have some discussion about the applicants, and then move from the discussion into kind of our nomination process that we talked about yesterday, and then take it from the nomination process to the voting process that we discussed as well yesterday. I would first like to thank all of the applicants for taking the time to come in and sit through yesterday. It was a long process, a long day, and so it means a lot. I think all of the committee members were impressed by the applicants that we received. I was encouraged by the number of applicants that we received, and I was encouraged, frankly, by the good turnout of the rural applicants that we received as part of this process. And so that was encouraging to me, and I think the one thing that stood out to me was the vast experience and breadth of experience that we had with the group that applied. And so that was encouraging to me as well. And it's a difficult decision that this committee has to make. Obviously, someone will be selected and the other 8 will not be selected. And my initial thought would be to tell the applicants that the selection of one person to me doesn't mean the rejection of the others. It's just that we've got to make a decision on that. And so with all that being said, I do want to thank again everyone for the time and energy and effort put into filling this vacant role and serving in that capacity. It's always good to have a good breadth of folks willing to serve in these different areas that we need service in our communities here in Woodbury County. So At this point, I think that I'll let Ms. Bertrand begin our discussion of the candidates, since we started with her first yesterday with the questions. So Ms. Bertrand, I would turn it to you to kind of begin the discussion and what your thoughts are, and kind of take us from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank all the candidates as well. I was very encouraged to see the interest and the quality of the candidates that presented both yesterday and submitted all their applications. I thought that we had a great quality in all candidates, and very encouraged to see how much from the rural community came forward to actually be actively engaged in wanting to support the Board of Supervisors and supporting the community of Woodbury County. With that said, 9 candidates creates a challenge. As Chairman Loomis indicated, that there can only be one at the end of the day, and that a selection of one does not necessarily mean the rejection of the other 8. For me, an approach ultimately comes down to being able to focus on a couple of top candidates. It's the only way that in the way my brain, I guess, processes things, is to have actually a discussion, and a real discussion on a smaller group of people. Again, my approach then is to actually take a short list approach on that. Given the considerations, the diversity of the qualifications, the balancing of our needs as a community between our rural and urban components, and then, trying to be able to shore up our valuation of our property values, because in order for us to support our board's desire to maintain low tax levies, we have to have a way to increase or shore up our assessed valuations. With that, I would say that the top 2 candidates that I believe that can achieve these, that I would desire to have an open dialogue and conversation so that we have transparency to our community, would be Mark Nelson out of Correctionville and Barbara Schloneker from the Bronson area. I think those 2 candidates, they both have very good qualities, very diverse qualities. They each bring something to the table. But in terms of being able to support Woodbury County, if I were to put it down to 2 people, those would be the 2 people that I would like to have further conversation on before we get to a nomination process.
Anything else, Ms. Bertrand?
I think that's it for now.
Okay. Mr. Gill, any thoughts of yours, please?
Okay. Well, thank you. And I just wanted to say that I do appreciate the 9 folks that threw their names into the hat. This was their quality candidates. This has been difficult from the beginning. First, whether or not to call for a special election or to do the appointment route. And that wasn't an easy choice to make, but the reasons I've already stated, we're at this process. One of the things that, 2 things that are important to me in looking for a candidate, first and foremost is to protect the autonomy of independent elected officials. I think that's always been very important to me, and over the years that I've been here, it's very important. So we're in this position where I can actually express that opinion. The other thing is that I've drawn the district maps for supervisors I started 20 years ago, and I've done it 3 times since then. And when I was drawing those districts, obviously someone else, the other folks on the committee and the supervisor ultimately approved those maps. But when I drew those, I purposely drew. You could get one district that would just rural folks in it, but it also would reach into Sioux City. So when I drew those, I drew them so that there was a possibility that there would be 2 folks that could represent the rural areas of Woodbury County. Did that purposely, and honestly, I really haven't seen it work out to that point, so I'm excited about this process now, is that I think we are going to end up with a rural person. When I went through the applications, there were 3 that rose to the top for me. Jeanette Beekman, Barb Sloniker, and Mark Nelson. Those are the folks that I think are there. Barbara Sloniker obviously has some real good professional capability. She knows her way around, especially the political end of things. Jeanette Beekman, one of the things that I'm very concerned about there too is the rural communities and the impact that someone can bring to the Board of Supervisors. Rural cities, to be specific, is that I think it would be a good to have a voice from the rural cities. And Mark Nelson, the rural area, obviously a strong farmer background, and that's something I think we've lacked for a long period of time in Woodbury County. So that's where I ended up after the applications. That's where I was at after the interviews yesterday. I was impressed with all of them, but in the end, I stuck with those top 3 that I had to begin with. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I think the one thing that has impressed me about all of the applicants and talking with your references is that, and what is encouraging, another thing that's encouraging to me is everyone's references, the ones that I spoke with or was able to speak with, they all indicated that the applicants were good listeners and fairly deliberative in their process making and decision making. They weren't quick to jump to decisions and make rash decisions. They weren't, going to just go into something with an opinion and then be unwilling to change an opinion. I think it's always important when you're working with a body, a governmental body, a local governmental body, that you have your convictions and you have your positions, but that you are also willing to listen to the other side and, if necessary, change your position for whatever reason. But if you don't think that it needs to be changed, to not change it. There's something to be said for having conviction, and there's something to be said for standing by your conviction. But I also think that it is a good trait and a good quality to be able to receive evidence, I guess, and be able to evaluate information, and then if you think you need to change. And that comes through an ability to listen and to work well with others. And so I commend all of the applicants, because all of the people that I spoke to as references all were unanimous. And that's one thing that I took from those references, is that everyone is capable and willing to do that. That was one thing that stood out to them. And to me, that's important. And so it did make the process difficult for me, because we have good applicants here this morning to consider. As Ms. Bertrand stated and as Mr. Gill stated, the one thing that I think is important as I review this, and is something that I took note of in my campaign this past year, and not that I'm comparing apples to apples, but the one thing that did come out to me during this past year when I was running for office is that the rural areas at times feel like they're left out, and that they need to be represented too. And that was important to me in this process. Not just qualifications. Qualifications are very important, but someone who can represent the rural areas of this county. It's a vast county that, has been said, is diverse, with smaller communities, medium-sized communities, and obviously Sioux City. But as I approached it and as I looked at it, I think that it is important for the rural areas to be represented on the Board of Supervisors. And so that's kind of what was an overarching approach that I had. My approach was, I think, similar to Ms. Bertrand's and Mr. Gill's, in that after looking at the applicants and looking at their applications and thinking about the interview process yesterday and following up with references, is that there were two candidates that rose to the top, in my opinion, that fit kind of what I think this county needs in terms of representation. And again, it's not to exclude or diminish or minimize the other applicants. It's just, there's no participation awards, I guess is the best way to put this. Someone has to be chosen. But I think ultimately whatever this committee's decision on is that, and what's encouraging also to me is that there are a number of you that were willing to run. And if you're not selected through this process in 2 years, you would have that opportunity to run and take that position over, if that's what you would want to do. And so at the end of the day, the top two candidates that I had in my mind were Mark Nelson and Jeanette Beekman. That Ms. Beekman brings an attitude of get the job done, get out of my way. I'm going to do what it takes to do the job. And that's something that I can appreciate growing up on a farm. And so that stood out to me, particularly when you're in kind of tough spots. What do? Well, I guess I'll go get my water and sanitation license so that I can fix the problem. That was important to me. And I know that a number of other candidates had that trait as well, but that did stand out to me. And, Mr. Nelson's vast experience, both in private and the public sector, stood out to me. And his agricultural background stood out to me as well. And so those would be my top two candidates and kind of the reasons why those are the reasons why those two candidates stood out to me. And so those are my comments that I would have. At this point, I guess I would turn it over to the actual nomination process. If there's any other discussion to be held, Ms. Bertrand, is there any other discussion that you would like to have of the candidates?
Could I add one thing before we
Sure.
go on? I just for, so it's clear to everybody. Once we make the appointment, that starts a 14-day process that folks can petition for a special election. And regardless of that, the appointment that we make serves until the next election of that position. So if the special election were to be petitioned for, that person would serve until that the person elected qualifies. And then if it isn't a special election, the person that we appoint serves the balance of this term until the next election. And after the canvass, that person actually takes office sooner than waiting until the January date when terms normally begin. Just wanted to.
And that next election would be November of 2024?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And I was going to bring that up as well. Thank you, Mr. Gill, for bringing that up. But again, like Mr. Gill said, there's 14 days. Should there be a petition, that's certainly something that the folks of Woodbury County, if that's what they deem that they want to do, they can move forward on that as well. So any other discussion, Mr. Gill, at this point that you would like to have?
No, thank you.
Ms. Bertrand, any other discussion at this point that you would like to have?
I think I just want to say that, again, this process was very thoughtful. given consideration. I think if we look at the 3 people that we just kind of discussed as our top candidates, they all had some great qualities. You know, for me, Mark Nelson brought that rural component. He very active, had a great amount of support. I talked to, and I have to say this, I actually talked to every single, or I called every single reference personal and professional for every candidate, and was fortunate enough to speak to most of them. I unfortunately wasn't able to reach everybody. My cell phone has been blowing up over the last couple of days with callbacks. And so I apologize to anybody who might be listening if I haven't talked to them as a personal reference. If I failed to do that, my apologies. Time was probably more of a commitment. I was encouraged and appreciated the fact that a lot of people took time on Sundays afternoon to speak to me. I would echo James's comments about one of the consistent thing that I heard was for each candidate that everyone was a good listener and that they took the time and energy and effort to really consider any kind of issue or item that they might have to vote on. I thought that, you know, Barbara has great experience. She has a track record to be proud of. I think helps support Woodbury County. I think from an economic development standpoint, she would be a great asset to be able to shore up our assessed valuation base. But one thing that I did hear consistently was that this district is a heavily rural component area. I think that that is something that we need to listen to as a committee, as it does speak volumes of our community. I think yesterday when I had the opportunity to ask questions of the candidates, one question that I did bring up quite a bit was balancing that rural and urban community component, given the size of our county and the size of our population and the location of our population. With that, I think I would actually like to make a nomination for consideration, and that would be Mark Nelson.
Thank you, Ms. Bertrand. Mr. Gill, would you like to make a nomination?
I'm
Any
going to
comments that you have?
pass.
I would echo most of what Ms. Bertrand has already said, and I don't have a lot more to add. I think, like I said, I think it's important that there be some rural representation, because if there's one message that I received over this past year, it was that. And it is important that we make sure that we're representing all of Woodbury County. And given that, I would also move to nominate Mark Nelson as well for the vacant seat. Any other discussion to be held regarding the nomination?
No.
Ms. Bertrand, Mr. Gill?
Nope. Having
There been a nomination for Mr. Nelson, both by Ms. Bertrand and myself, is an appropriate time to take a vote then on that nomination? Ms. Bertrand, would you agree?
I would agree.
Mr. Gill, would you agree with that?
I agree.
At this time then, the committee, if you're in favor of appointing Mr. Nelson to the vacant seat on the Board of Supervisors, all in favor say aye.
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 Nomination of Mr. Nelson voted, committee voted, nomination passes 3-0. Mr. Nelson has been appointed then to fill the vacant seat in the Board of Supervisors with the departure of Mr. DeWitt. At this point in time, then, again, as Mr. Gill referenced, the time clock for the 14 days to petition would start. If there's somebody, folks in Woodbury County that would like to go ahead and begin that process, feel free to do so. And at this point in time, I think we need to fill out the appropriate paperwork. Is that correct, Mr. Gill? For the
Yes, sir.
appointment of Mr. Nelson. And Mr. Nelson, just for your benefit, as indicated before, should there be the petition process and the special election, your position on the board would either end at the, if there's a special election, or it would end then at the general election period time in November of 2024, okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would
Ms.
we
Goodwin.
like to give Mr. Nelson an opportunity to speak, or anybody else?
Sure, that would be fine with me if Mr. Nelson or if any other of the applicants have any other comments that they would like to make. I am open to listening as well, if anyone has anything else to say for the good of the order.
I guess I would like to thank all three of you. I know that, especially James, with just starting your position after the election, you've been doing a lot of new work, and this time of year is very busy for your departments, and you didn't need this thrown on top of it, so I appreciate all the extra effort that you've done into this. I'd like to echo what all three of you said, that I think there was a very deep pool of candidates that really cared about Woodbury County, and I don't think that some of them will be done in the political process. I think you could see them involved, potentially running in the future, and at the end of the day, it's a win for Woodbury County. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve, and I'm ready to get to work. So,
Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Are you ready to come to work at 3:15 today?
Absolutely.
Does anyone have anything else, any other comments that anyone would like to make? I would open it up at this point in time. Okay. Mr. Gill, should we do our paperwork with Mr. Nelson before we adjourn, or
We need
adjourn?
one more motion to, in conjunction with the paperwork, is to direct the publication of the appointment.
Good enough. Is there a motion to direct the publication of Mr. Nelson to that appointment?
So moved.
Is there a
Seconded.
second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion to do the publication and appointing Mr. Nelson passes 3-0. Should I go ahead and fill this out at this point in
Please.
time, Mr. Gill? Is that appropriate?
If your handwriting is better than mine.
I'll do my best. Is that for the next election date that we fill in, or is that
His address.
his address? You haven't moved Mr. Nelson in the last 2 days? Okay. All right, Mr. Nelson, all the signatures are final. The ink is dry. So, Congratulations, Mr. Nelson. Again, thank you to everyone who applied. It was a good process, in my opinion. That's my 2 cents. Some may not agree with that, but I think that it was a good process with a good pool of applicants across this county, and I think that we should be proud of the applicants that stepped up and were willing to serve in this capacity. At this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting for this morning.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion to adjourn passes 3-0. We are